Hi there, I'm Bob Cook. I'm the current keeper of the parish clock here at St Andrew's Church in Earls Colne. My role is to try and keep the clock running as accurately as we can for the benefit of the villagers and the people passing through. Well, here we are at the door. Today, I'm not only going to show you what I do to keep the clock running correctly, but I'm also going to show you the workings of the clock. But we have to remember that we're going up in the tower, so we have to do it safely. So we must be considering health and safety, and we must also make sure that we ask permission before we come. The reason why we need to ask permission is because the clock belongs to the village and the church belongs to the church. So if we're going to come into the church people need to know. But we already have permission, so come on in. Right. So here's the tower room. In we go, and another thing I do, take the key out. Pop it there, so some scallywag doesn't lock us in. Now what we need to do is get the lights on in here. Lights. And this is the tower, access to the tower. Again, unlock the door, pop the key on the stairs so that it's not in immediate view. And there you go. Access to the stairs. These are the stair lights. And this is the ringing room, ringing chamber. Just give that a press and it switches itself off. You've got to remember to switch those off when you come back down the tower. That one switches itself off. Right, well, welcome to the ringing chamber. I'm going to explain to you about that notice that you've just seen on the door about the dangers that you have in this room. Now, if you'd like to look at this one, this is the way the bells work. They pull this and the bells rock, and in the end they get them rocking both ways. There can be a situation where they save a bit of time of all that working it backwards and forwards. They save a bit of time by having it where the bells are up. Is what they call having the bells up. What you really don't want to be in this situation is somewhere near that rope when it topples, when they give it a tug and it topples, because as you see, that wouldn't be very funny. So that's why you've got to watch out for hazardous and the bells hung up. And here's a situation which we don't normally see. This could be a sign of danger. Because the rope is not hanging in the way that the ones normally do. It's probably okay when I look at the lengths of the rope, but it's worth noting that as we come into the clock chamber, when we go to the clock chamber a bit later, the first rope we come to on our left is this one, because the layout of this floor is exactly the same in the clock room. So as we come in the door, when we go up to the clock, this is the rope that we've got to watch out for. Now, if we return to the clock, the bell here, the mechanism that actually does the chime and the strike is a little bit of machinery that stands here. And when the clock decides to do a bit of a clang on there, that's what it does. Now, what you mustn't do is swing that bell while that mechanism is in place. And the bell ringers know this. And the way they disengage the clock, the chime and the strike from from the bell is by pulling these two. Pulling this one for a start. This one is the strike. And if you see, they've already got themselves a warning notice that you've got to protect the clock. So what they do is they take this nut off, they pull down to there, put the nut back on, and we've taken the strike mechanism away from the bell, so we're safe. If we move across to the other side of the room, similar thing applies. Another one of these pulls, pull that one down, tie it off over here in the same way, and the chimes are disengaged. Now we may need to do that. Sometimes we may need to do that. The clock goes out of phase and we might need to move it and make the chimes work more often than they normally would. So we silence them in the same way that the bell ringers do. And that's probably all you need to know now, so we can proceed on up to the clock room. Okay, now the health and safety thing you need to know. If you'd like to have a look at these are the ropes that can be quite dangerous if the bell is up, as we've mentioned before. So that could potentially, if you snagged on that and the bell took you up, your body's actually got to go through that little hole up there, which is probably quite unhealthy and best avoided. So any of these ropes are best stayed away from. They should tell you if the bells are up, but you've got to be sure to stay away from them. The next thing you really need to know about is these stairs, which are very steep, and it's the usual advice on the stairs, 3 points of contact, and just take great care at the top. There is no bar to stop you coming back down again, so take care when you get to the top. When you get to the top, you'll see there is a rope that you've got to manoeuvre your way around. Just be very, very careful around that one. Right, now the thing you need to know about is the clock changes in spring and autumn. Now you need to gain an hour in spring. And the people who advise us on the clock say the best thing to do really is to just stop the clock in the way I've said, very, very gently, immediately after it struck an hour. There's no mechanisms engaged, it's just a plain clock stopped. And then you just leave it and restart it at the correct time the next day. They say that's the safest way. There are ways, when you know what you're doing, to actually stop the clock, fiddle with the mechanism, and then let it get going. But their advice is don't do that, just stop the clock. And it's the same in the autumn, really. If you want to lose the hour, you just stop the clock very gently, as I've said. Stay up just after the hour, that is, and then just hang around for an hour and restart it on the hour on time. Okay, we're back here now to talk about the regulation of the clock, when it goes faster or slower. It's a pendulum that expands in hot weather, and the pendulum gets longer, basically. And the longer the pendulum, the slower the clock ticks and tocks. But you can compensate for that in two ways. You can add weight at the top. That will actually effectively make the pendulum a bit shorter, so it'll go a bit faster. Or you can take weight off to do the opposite. The crude way to do it is to adjust this nut here. It doesn't look much like a nut, but if you look carefully underneath it, you'll see the thread. And what that does, that nut, as it goes up and down on the thread, will raise or lower the pendulum. That's quite a crude adjustment. And it's done by sticking this pin in there and just levering it. Obviously, you'd have to do it when the clock stopped, and you have to make sure that you do not twist this at all. It's got to be strong, well supported, so that the thing can't move. This is very heavy, but you've just got to make sure it can't move. So when the clock stopped, the pin in there, and that'll adjust that, or adjust that to undo the nut. The other way is to put weights on top of the pendulum. Now the way we do that is very carefully, and it is possible to do it without actually stopping the clock. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, and if you need to stop the clock, well, just do it. And the way you do that is by gently stopping, slowing it down. All you've got to do is restrict these on each side until the pendulum is hardly swinging and the ticking and tocking stops. Then you've got to stop the pendulum and you can do anything you like. But it is possible to put weights on and off with the clock running, and that's probably the best way if you can. So here's a small weight that goes on, one of many, and you can do it by reaching up. So you can put the weight on and take the weight off. Put the weight on, take the weight off. Speed it up, slow it down. And that's as easy as that. Now in the summer, you have to make some bigger corrections and you need a lot more weights. Currently we've only got a couple of washers on there because it's very cold. So here's a sample of the weights we use. There's one of the washers for the fine adjustment, even finer adjustments. Now this is the way I do it in the summer. It takes us quite a fair amount of weight to keep the thing running right. But by regulating what we put in this tin, there's a very heavy one, that's quite a heavy one as well, and the big bolt. You can add quite a lot of weight fairly easily just in one go, but when I put the tin on, I tend to stop the clock to do that. So that's that then. So when you're stopping the clock, you've got to remember very, very gently. It's like a kid on a swing really. You've got to just do it very, very gently so the clock stays happy. Don't stop it suddenly, just bit at a time. And then when you restart it, it's the same. A gentle rock, gradually build the speed up. The same way as you would a kid on a swing. And there you go. Right, now you've seen the pendulum, we now need to really move on to the clock itself. And the way we do that, the clock is above the pendulum. The way we do that is we go up these stairs till we finally arrive at the clock where you can see the lights on up there. Right, there you go. As many strikes as you can possibly get, but this is an important time because this, from 6 to 7 minutes from now, is the time when the clock is actually quite quiet. It's not doing anything. After that, it starts getting ready for another chime or a strike. And it's that point when you must not be stopping, starting or changing anything in any way. So there you've got. From now on, we've got about 6 minutes when we can stop, start, turn the mechanism on. We'll talk about that later on, how you do that. But this is your 6 to 7 minutes of peace and quiet when you can actually be touching the clock. Now at the top of the steps, taking great care. This is the light switch for the clock cabinet itself. This is the rope you've got to take great care of because you sometimes need to go along this walkway. So this is the one that you've got to take great care of. Just don't brush against it, don't get it caught up, because yet again, if you get caught up in that one, you've got to go through that little hole. The bell will take you. The bell weighs over 2 tons. And then when you go along the walkway, you're just got to take great care about this rail because it's probably a bit on the low side, and you just don't lean on it really. Just take great care on the walkway. Yes, you have to go across this platform to get behind the clock. So you're actually looking at the face of the tower right now through that door. And this here is the wire that connects the ringing room to the chime mechanism. So downstairs they need to disable the chime when they want to ring the bells, and they pull the big cable, and that pulls all this lot down, and that has meant that the chimes won't operate while the bells are being rung. So when they go home, all they have to do is just let that cable go back up here, and then the chimes will work again. Now here you see the pulley that's taking the wire down to the weight for the chime mechanism. So the weight is below that, and if you follow the wire back, you'll see that it turns down again on another pulley, drops down into the clock cabinet, and drops onto that drum. So the weight is effectively trying to turn that drum, and all the motor does is rewind it back up and lift the weight. So the weight is trying to power that drum round, and it's sending the power down this chain into the mechanism to make the clock work. So what you see now here is the back half of the escapement mechanism. So it's gradually letting the power go, and the power is coming from this drum that's being pulled down by this weight, and it's trying to pull the drum that way round. So it's tightening this chain, and the chain is connected to the gear wheel down there, and that is trying to turn all the mechanism. And if you look carefully, you can see the big gear wheel over there is actually turning. So there you go, you had the complete strike operation there, and as soon as the operating lever could detect a slot, it dropped back down and it stopped striking. Now you can tell it's 12 o'clock. There's a very short slot there. All it's going to do, the next one, because it wants to chime, it wants to strike 1 o'clock, it's just going to sense 1, it's going to let it strike 1, then it's going to drop back down into the slot, so you only get 1 strike. And if you follow it along, obviously this is the 2 o'clock one, because it can detect once, twice, and it's going to drop down in there, so it will strike twice. Keep that going, and it's going to detect. You can see the little marks where it detects on the rim. 1, 2, 3. It'll strike 3 times and then drop down into there. It won't strike on the 3rd time. And that's how this part of the mechanism works. So here we are at the back of the clock, and if you look down, you can see the pendulum. If you look right at the bottom, you can see the bob weight. And if you look very carefully, you can see the 2 washers that we've currently got on there to regulate the timekeeping. There may be more or there may be less at different times of the year. So if you come up then, actually up the pendulum itself, you'll notice that it's made of brass. The reason it's made of brass is that brass has a lower coefficient of expansion in heat and cold than iron and steel does. So obviously if it doesn't expand and contract very much, the clock will tend to stay on time pretty well. It's hanging on that piece of spring steel that you can see, and that actually is the pivot point of the pendulum. If you drop down below that, you'll see the shaft that comes out of the back of the clock with a little universal joint on it. That goes to some gearing that you can see on the right hand side there. And the gearing is just to make sure that the minutes go round in a minute and the hour hand goes round quite a lot slower. And if you look at the arms sticking up above it, you'll see they're the balance. So they are balancing the weight of the hands outside, so that the clock has very, very little work to do. All it's doing is turning something at a bar that's balanced effectively. Right, here we are again. I have to explain that the clock is a bit old. In fact, it's very old, and it has the odd quirk that's been known for an awful long time and nobody's been able to get to the bottom of. The chimes go out of phase. So I'm going to talk to you in a moment about how we correct that. Right, so there's the escapement. If you move slightly to the right, you'll see the chain, and then above, at the end of the chain, you can see it going round a drum, and you above there's it's going round that drum. Now you can see those cables are the ones that go down to the weight, and so the weights are trying to turn that drum, and the chain is taking that power actually into the clock. If you look at it carefully, you can actually see that chain moving very slightly as it turns the drum, very, very slightly, and that is where all the power is coming from. The drum is trying to turn, it turns the chain, puts the power into the clock, and that's how the clock is powered. And the same applies to the chimes as well. They're doing the same thing. Power goes into the chimes or the strike, and the weight gradually goes down. So, and then the strike is at the final. And that was the motors had just done their stuff. The weight came down and powered the chimes, and then the motor did its stuff by lifting the weights back up again. It's now rewound and ready to go again. Right then, that's it. So lights off. Lock up. Now we've been through access to the church, all the health and safety issues, we've seen the ringing room, we've seen the clock, and we've had a good look round it. So all I can say is, please carry on looking after it and loving it in the way lots of people have done before you and I. Take your time, enjoy yourself. Thank you for watching.